is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Rio Koyama, who's CEO for Remoti, and we're talking about how to get to zero trust IT in a way that's simple. In fact, it may only involve one line of code. Rio, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike. I'm glad to be here.
So let's jump into it. How exactly can we get to zero trust? Because everybody has it in their head that this is a complex, multi-layered endeavor, and you're talking about a single line of code. So, as the man said, explain yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that's interesting is that TCP/IP is obviously the protocols that power the internet. And back in the day, my co-founders and I did the first silicon TCP/IP stack. So we might not be the smartest guys in the world, but we're pretty smart about the protocols themselves. And one of the challenges that I think zero trust faces is that everything around the internet has been built around the public internet, and it really just assumes a level of trust. And so, all IP addresses are exposed. If you communicate to an endpoint on TCP/IP through a publicly visible endpoint, if you ask it to say hello, it'll say hello back. But the protocols themselves don't have to work that way. And so, if you look at the whole zero trust or even the security industry, security is really sort of prevention and detection. And so much of the industry has shifted towards detection because so much of it about security is about public endpoints or scannable endpoints. What we do is with a line of code, we allow you to do the TCP/IP stack in a way that's much more secure. Maybe a simple way to say it is Mike can own a TCP/IP stack anywhere, and as long as it's on the internet, you can connect to it, but only you or whoever you've given permission to can connect to it. And you don't ever have to manually manage IP addresses or subnet addresses. It'll just be yours, and you're able to connect to it. And maybe a simple way to think about it is because the TCP/IP stack allows you to do inside-out connections as well as outside-in connections. And so that's what we sort of enable. And we think that's really the best way of doing zero trust because you're never exposed anywhere.
Who writes that single line of code, and where and how does it get installed?
So what we've done is we've invented a little piece of code that we call networking as a service. And so it's a little daemon that attaches to the TCP/IP stack. And so what our single line of code does is it says, register this to this person. And as long as they're authenticated, and that authentication could be like Okta or GStack or whatever you're using for your authentication. And as long as this person comes, they're able to connect to that. Now, what's interesting about how that configuration works is that in the world today, we think about applications. And so, with things like containers, the world has really gotten virtualized. And so it's not even about, servers or metal devices anymore. It's about SSH running or a SQL running or a web server running. And so what we allow you to do is essentially have that level of granularity. So if you've got a web server running or if you've got an admin screen running somewhere, you can register that. You as a user can just simply, download and register the devices, and then it gets registered in, and then you can connect to that. So if you're, just a DevOps or a developer admin, think of it this way. Today, with things like Kubernetes or Docker containers, you can deploy thousands of service endpoints, in minutes. But then the interesting thing is you have to manually decide who has access to that, what kind of security you want to have underneath that. And you might have to do something really as pedantic as managing all the subnet addresses. And so we really think that because the protocols themselves are software, why not make it programmatically solvable? And so that's what our solution lets you do.
The network as a service, is this something that I install as a service if I'm an organization, or are you delivering that to me as a cloud service to connect all these things together?
So think of us as a registry. So we register people and endpoints, and then you decide how those things all tie together. So like I talked about before, if you think about a network today, or at least in the legacy terms, usually it's some sort of IP range. So for example, if you're on a local area network or a home network or an office network, usually that's like a 10 dot address or a 192 type of address. And then you have to decide who can see what, and then how do you configure all of that. The way that we do it, because it's all software, you can say, I have a number of SQL instances out there, like a staging SQL instance or a production SQL instance. And then you can say, oh, all the developers I have can have access to that. But I don't want them to have SSH access to those instances themselves. And so all the DevOps admins could have separate control of all those things. And so what we do, again, is we allow you to register people and endpoints. And then what we do is we allow you to essentially create a network of people and endpoints. And then you can decide how those get connected to, how those get managed. So things like managing IP restriction or worrying about somebody scanning ports is no longer a concern, just because it's literally not available.
And so the people side of that equation what gives me the identity, and that's the zero trust, because I'm tying the access to the services to their identity.
Yeah, that's right. So that piece of it is, the identity, it's zero trust because you know who it is. So it's a permissive sort of connection. The interesting thing, though, is on the flip side. So let's say you have a local area network today. Typically, most ports are available, right? So let's say you had something as simple as like a little Raspberry Pi type of device. Oops, let me get this. Usually, you might have something like SSH running on that. And the configuration underneath it, so if you got into the gory details, is you'd say, oh, run SSH on 0.0.0.0. And what that means is run SSH on any IP address that I get assigned. What our technology allows you to do is, so there's really three types of IP addresses. There's a public IP address, right? So it's a thing that's anything available on the global public internet. Then there are these subnet addresses, which are, again, things that are local, maybe a local area network. But every TCP IP stack supports something called the local host address. And so it's special in the sense that it starts with a 127. And what it does is it's not routable. And so what that means is you can't get to it. So like if you type in 127, it's going to go to your machine. But what we do is we allow Mike to use that 127 address range. So on your local machine, maybe you have 127.001:33,000, and that goes to your WordPress instance hosted at AWS. And maybe 33,001 goes to a SQL instance at AWS. 33,003 goes to, machine learning at GCP or something like that. On the other end, on the computer end, what you're able to do is say, only make this service available to 127. And that means, so one of the big hacking vulnerabilities right now is somebody breaches your local area network. Then you can immediately do what's called a port scan and see what's available in that network. And then you look for vulnerabilities. The interesting thing about taking this approach with the TCP IP stack and tying things to localhost is that it's invisible to a port scan. And so if you think about most of the zero trust type of recommendations that are out there, they don't really talk about the endpoint vulnerability, but this is a way that you can solve that, where you no longer have ports visible even to a network scan. And that's something that we don't think gets addressed enough. And that's something that we think we have a unique solution that lets you not worry about that either.
Do you think as we go along to zero trust that the whole motion around networking and security is just going to converge more aggressively? Because it seems like we always go down this path where security is an overlay. And in your instance, it feels more and more like maybe we can just address this at the network layer.
I think you have to. I mean, what's interesting is that, we have, what do they say? The danger of history is if you don't learn from it, right? I mean, I remember the days when I used to be excited when my phone rang, right? That's no longer the case because it's so easy to spoof almost every phone number out there. And I just picked up mail from my mailbox, and most of it was just bulk messaging, right? And because those are publicly accessible endpoints, the internet has been built around that way. And it's interesting because cloud computing has been built around the fast, explosive growth of the public internet. But now what we're talking about is private stuff on the internet. And so I really think you have to solve it at the networking layer. What's even crazier right now is if you look at the internet today, the internet runs on BGP, right, which is an underlying protocol that decides where all the packets go, right? And so I think it was last summer, somebody misconfigured a BGP server in Africa, And for some reason, all of Google's traffic routed through China for 8 hours, right? And so the interesting thing as we start talking to more enterprise customers is, you hear things like data sovereignty, or I want my data to remain in country. The problem is if you actually go on the public internet, you have no control for all of that. But if all of a sudden, exactly to your point, want to solve all this at the network layer, it's very, very solvable, because you can say, hey, I don't ever want my data to leave AWS, right? And so what's interesting today is like I could connect to Japan, but connecting directly to an endpoint in Japan across the internet, even though it's peer-to-peer, might not be the fastest, because if I onboard most of the traffic to the closest endpoint at AWS, that backhaul is probably faster. And so I really believe that you're going to see more and more a transition towards solving it at the network layer, because I think the best security starts with networking, right? And until you are prepared to address it at that layer, you're going to run into all kinds of stuff. It's just more and more difficult because, like I said, I've got a public phone number and it's not very useful today. And it's shocking how quickly that happened. And, I think using public IP addresses, or even, subnet addresses that are scannable and not deterministic, I think it's a bit of fool's gold. And so I think you're going to have to solve it. Now, the good news is, back in 1969 or whenever the TCP/IP was invented, there's plenty of plumbing that's already designed there to make it extraordinarily secure, right? I mean, the way we like to joke about it is a public internet connection is a hallway, a door, and a door lock. And the great news about a lock is that there's a lock, but the bad news about it is there's a key, right? And so with things like, GPUs and everything, that's eminently solvable. If you want to use TCP/IP in the most secure way, well, now you have a room with no windows or doors. And so now you don't have to worry about that vulnerability. And most crimes are really crimes of opportunity, right? And so if somebody can scan your IP address, they're going there first. If they can't scan your IP address, they're not going to go to you first, because it's going to be a more difficult thing to be able to breach.
All right. So we're looking into the new year here. What's your predictions? What's your crystal ball telling you about all this? When's it all going to come together?
I think it's going to come together sooner than later. Obviously, we're into an interesting economic period of time where, everybody's going to be a little bit more mindful about where they spend money. And solving things at the networking layer does give you a much more, fortress type of opportunity. Whereas, it's great if you can tell me, if you use a public IP, we run honeypots all the time as experiments. And if you have a public IP address at AWS, it gets port scanned about 50,000 times a day, right? That's pretty hard. And I know I could go out and buy lots of tools that tell me who's trying to detect it and do all those things. But going back to things that maybe many of your readers won't even understand, I'd like an unlisted phone number. And so, I think that might be the way to approach sort of these things. And I think people are going to realize that that's just the most effective way to go. Because, I think there's a million companies that use AWS. I would imagine that all but very few of them have huge DevOps teams that can deal with all this stuff. And I think what people are going to need is, they're going to need to know that those endpoints are just protected, right? And again, it's just like a telephone number today. It's almost impossible for us to protect it because, as great as things like AI are today, they help the bad guys just as good as the good guys.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Just a little ounce of prevention at the protocol level may indeed prevent a pound of cure. Rio, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Newport Davis, who's Executive Vice President, Chief Information Security and Product Officer for Comcast Cable. And we're talking about the connected home and security and what are some of the challenges we're running into these days. Newport, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
The connected home is now essentially an extension of the office, and large numbers of people are still working from home even this far after the alleged end of the COVID-19 pandemic. What have we learned so far about some of those trends and challenges that security people are encountering to help, keep that extended enterprise as we know it today secure?
Yeah, it's not just people working from home, but they're still, doing school from home and all kinds of other things. So our second cyber report, that our first one was done 2 years ago. In that time, in the 2 years, we've seen a 25% increase in the connected devices in our customers' homes. So the security of those devices is important. Anything that is connected to a Comcast gateway is protected. So anything in that Wi-Fi network in the home is protected. And so you can kind of live your digital life a little more safely and feel a little more secure, whether you're, doing your work from those digital devices or just playing a video game, or, if it's some IoT device that is just, operating in the background.
Do you see people separating the networks that they use at home from the ones that they use to connect to the office, or are they using the same core network and therefore a lot of the behaviors that we might see are risky, shall we say?
So yes and no. We see some separating out, in a separate VLAN or some other way. But most offices do have, a VPN or some other secure tunnel to connect from your home to the office. There are also more and more secure devices. So, there's businesses are making sure that the device that you connect into their network is also secure. So if you have a secure connection and a secure device, with multi-factor authentication and all types of other identity controls, you do reduce that risk.
Are you also seeing people being more mobile? So they're accessing services not just from home, but they're going down to the coffee shop, they're kind of going to their vacation homes or wherever they be, or visiting relatives. So, is that part of the security conversation? Because it's not like I log in every day from the same place.
Absolutely. This is where there's a whole movement around something called zero trust network access. And it basically says, look, you really can't trust the network from that point of view, right? So if I'm in a coffee shop and I'm using a open network, how do I still make sure that I can connect securely? So that a whole new set of controls are being put into place for that zero trust network access.
Who manages all of this? Because it seems to me that most IT teams are shorthanded to begin with, and managing all this stuff at home seems fairly hard. So are they just relying more and more on some sort of service from you guys to kind of take care of all this for them?
Yes, if you're in your home, it is very, very difficult for most people to even realize that they have that many connected devices, which are, talking to who knows whom, right, on the internet. So it is really, really important to have that, almost like this safety net that is there to just protect you. And that is why that Comcast Xfinity Advanced Security product, which is free for anybody who uses our gateway, just protects you from any device that connects through the Wi-Fi that is connected through that gateway. So it really does make a difference. I use it in my own home. I'm a Comcast customer as well as an employee. And, I will just see a little thing pop up that, my son may have gone somewhere where it's not safe. So it just, that level of safety and alerting really, really does help you.
Are you seeing more of the bad guys targeting people working at home? Are they scanning and looking for those folks because they determine that maybe they are more vulnerable, and then that becomes the entry point to the rest of the enterprise network?
We don't have any specific data around that, but the overall number of threats is definitely increasing. So our Xfinity X5 Advanced Security product has blocked 10 billion threats in the 5 years that it has been running. And that trend per year keeps going up. So the number of average number of threats that we block is average number of unique threats that we block is 23 per month per household. Oh. The actual number is probably several times that, because a unique threat doesn't happen just once. It is executed multiple times.
And a lot of times we have devices that are connected to that home network that are not just my laptop that I'm using for work. There's all kinds of stuff connected. And each of those things has a different security profile. So is that something else that you guys will manage, because somebody might attack some device or a printer or whatever it may be, and then try to laterally move that malware through? So how extensive are your efforts to connect everything that is on that home network?
We don't discriminate. So anything that is connected to that home network, there are two types of controls. One is incoming. So, is there something coming in from a malicious IP or, a known bad reputation site that is trying to connect to something in the home? So we do monitor that and block that. And then the same outgoing. So if, for example, your device has become part of a botnet or it is trying to access a malicious site, we also block that. So both of those.
So getting your crystal ball out for the new year, as we kind of look at what's coming down the pike, what do you think is going to be, the current state of the art for securing connected homes? And what do you expect to see happen in the coming year? Will everything get smarter? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think the trend is going to that number, that 25% increase we saw in 2 years, I think that's actually going to accelerate. So, everything from smart light bulbs to all of the things that we already, baby swings that are connected to the network, and your laundry machine that orders replacement detergent when it runs out, right? So everything is going to get more connected. I think there are standards emerging, which we are integral parts of defining those standards. Is how do we make sure that IoT devices are secure? And by IoT devices, I just mean Internet of Things. And everything from, default passwords to making sure that they are updatable over the wire. So when a vulnerability is discovered, that they can be patched. So that is really important. As the devices keep increasing, I think we are going to see emerging standards and consumers becoming more smart about, hey, this device complies to a standard and this device doesn't. And hopefully buying the devices that comply to standards.
And what's your best advice to the IT folks that are looking at all this stuff, because they have all these employees working from home? How do they know what the level of security is going to be? And, do they need to personally check that, or do they just get a report from you guys? How do I know that my employee's network at home is secure enough and trustworthy enough?
So that is, something that the IT team would have to do for that particular employer. But it's really three fundamental things. Is the identity secure of the person who's trying to get in? So, the identity of the person. And that is usually confirmed through some kind of multi-factor authentication, and should be. Then second is the device that they're connecting to through secure. So that is, either through some device identity or making sure that the device has, anti-malware, EDR, all kinds of other. And then the third is, what are the network controls, if any? Now, if you can't control the network, then you also may have to look at the application level controls. But so just to summarize, the person identity, the device identity and health, the network health, and then the application health. And you have to look at all four.
All right. Last question. You mentioned zero trust, and a lot of people have it in their head that this is hard to do and that I'm going to get all this layer defense and all these products. But the more I talk to you, I have to question whether or not I can just get zero trust as a service. And if I have it applied to the machine and the user and the application, I'm in pretty good shape.
Yeah, it sounds easy, but it's not, as you can imagine, right? Devices are complex. As you just said, people don't just access through your, it's tablets, it's laptops, it's mobile phones, it's all types of devices. Identities are complex, and applications are complex, and you put all three of them into a ecosystem. And that's what Zero Trust has to manage. But yes, the promise of Zero Trust, I think, is really great, because what it really does is say, at any given time, any given moment in time, how can I look at that entire ecosystem and determine what the risk is to allow a person through a device to connect to a corporate resource?
All right, great. Newbert, thanks for being on the show.
Of course. Happy to be here.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Just because you can do something yourself doesn't mean you should, because there's lots of other things you could probably do that add more value. Hey, guys, thanks for watching.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live on the show floor at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con in Detroit. It's actually pretty busy out here right now. I guess maybe it's a break in the sessions. Yep. I am joined by a longtime friend of mine. I haven't had him on video in certainly before COVID, but a while. Let me introduce you to Omri Gazit. Omri, welcome.
Great to be here. Thank you, Alan. It's been a minute.
It has been a little more than a New York minute, as we say. Omri, I'm not going to embarrass you, but I got you. Before we start talking about, Omri is with a company now called Acerto, and we're going to jump into it. But I want you to understand a little bit about who this fellow is and what he's done, and why I have a ton of respect for him, and I enjoy having him as a friend. Omri, tell them the Omri Gazette story. Go ahead. Started on a cold winter night.
That's right, exactly. Over 30 years ago, building software for developers for about 30 years. Did a startup, and that went public. That was my rose-colored tour through startup back in the 90s, and then joined Microsoft and helped, was one of the first dozen people on .NET, so was a co-founder of that project, and later a co-founder of the Azure project, where we worked on access control and Azure Active Directory. So those are my roots in identity and access.
Absolutely.
And ran cloud engineering at HP, and most recently the chief product officer of Puppet.
Yep. So it's a pretty impressive story, and that's just what he's done in work. You can hear the rest of his life. But anyway, Omri, you're now with Acerto. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume a lot of folks out here it's a new name for them, a new company.
Yep.
Why don't we, give them a little background?
Yeah, so, we really the story starts 15 years ago, back when I was at Microsoft, and we were thinking about what was going to happen to identity and access in the age of SaaS and cloud.
Right.
Well, fast forward 15 years, identity moved to the cloud.
No doubt.
So you have OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect and SAML and JOT, and you have companies like Auth0 and Okta and a bunch of others that have made it so that no one has to go build authentication anymore if you don't want to, right? It's all standards-based, it's all cloud-based. Access, the access part of identity and access didn't move forward at all. Hasn't moved forward at all in the last 15 years. And so my co-founder and I, who worked together on what became Azure Active Directory, decided to go focus on that problem and really solve that problem. And that problem is even bigger than the problem of identity.
Absolutely. You mentioned Active Directory. Look, there was a time in the world where Microsoft used to get banged on for being a monopoly maybe with Windows. But the fact of the matter was, the real monopoly was Active Directory. Active Directory had become the de facto standard for directory services with identity and access.
That's right.
Right? And because you didn't have a cloud.
Yep.
Right?
We had 95% market share of and my boss, Bob Muglia, who used to run the server and tools division, president of the server and tools division, used to call it the linchpin workload for the Windows Server franchise.
It was.
That's how important it was.
It was that important, right? I mean, again, those not my age or even Omri's age, right? There was a time where a company called Novell started something called LDAP.
That's right.
And LDAP was very much that was like the first directory service.
Yep.
And it was great when we all ran, Novell NetWare and so forth. Windows came along, 95% market share of laptops and desktops. It didn't have many laptops. Desktops, but also Windows Server.
Yep.
And it became, that's how you assigned access control. That's how you did identity. Now, like you said, the cloud comes along. And frankly, it's not just the cloud. Microsoft isn't at 95. They're probably at 80% now. But you have more places, more AD sitting in your data center or in your server closet isn't going to do it. Now, Microsoft moved AD to as a service, right, in Azure.
Yep.
But even that wasn't enough.
Yeah, so I would say, if you think about the challenges today that admins face, they used to live in LDAP or Active Directory, and what they did was they assigned users to groups, and groups represented roles in business applications, and it was clunky, but it was one place to administer all of that. Now, in the age of SaaS and cloud, they have dozens or hundreds of different admin consoles, and so the admin's life is just hell right now, right? And not to mention the developers, they have to reinvent that wheel every time they build a new microservice or application. And microservices just make it worse because every microservice builds its own access control, and so it's impossible to reason about like the surface area of a microservices-based application. So that's why we built Asserto, and this week, we open sourced our client-side authorizer called Topaz.
Oh, okay.
As a new open source project that combines OPA, the Open Policy Agent, so it uses OPA as a decision engine, but then it brings a embedded directory with it that represents the Google Zanzibar model. If you know how Google Docs and Google Drive works, they basically have this idea where you can assign a viewer or a commenter or an owner type of permission to users or groups, and that cascades all the way down through the object directory until you can basically evaluate queries like, does Alan have viewer access on this document if Alan is in this group and if this document is in this folder? Sound familiar?
Absolutely. I get
directory.
It is a directory.
That's right. And so that's what we've brought together. We brought together a directory and OPA together. So now you have policy as code, but you can also do this.
Now I understand.
Yeah.
So we're marrying OPA to a directory,
exactly.
but it's not your grandpa's directory.
That's right. It's a directory that contains not just users and groups.
It's almost a portable directory.
That's right, and it has objects and the relationships between the objects and the users and groups.
Right, so it's not just that clunky users and groups.
Yes.
It takes sort of that zero trust model where I'm not going to, just because you're in a group doesn't mean you get everything here.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to have 3 million groups because there's 3 million permutations of what I'm going to do. I'm going to marry you to certain objects, and that's who you...
That's right, and that's really kind of adheres to the principle of least privilege, which is all of us are trying to get to, right?
Right.
I mean, today, if you look at breaches, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you lock down each user to the minimum set of operations that they need, but no more than that, so they can limit the blast radius of these types of breaches. And so Asserto and companies like us, help us do that.
So Topaz is open source. That's the client side.
Yes.
But can you use it without the other side?
Absolutely. So Topaz is completely standalone. It has everything you need to build fine-grained, policy-based, real-time authorization. into your SaaS app, into your microservice, into your API. And then we have a control plane that Acerto hosts. It's a SaaS control plane that helps you do all the management. So management of policies, management of users and groups and connections to identity providers like Okta and Auth0. Gather all the decision logs and centralize them and pour them into your Splunk or your Elk. So all of the stuff that you need to make it enterprise grade is what we have in our control plane.
Go right in. All right, I got to do a shameless plug. Omri was nice enough to submit a byline to Container Journal. It was published last week. It's called The 5 Laws of Cloud Native Authorization. And go ahead, give us the 5 laws of cloud. It's here for you in case you need any cheat notes, but go ahead.
Sounds good. So, one of the things that we noticed is that, we haven't moved forward in 15 years, but all of a sudden in the last year or two, all these large companies like Google and Intuit, Airbnb and Carta and Netflix, they're all writing about how they do cloud native authorization. It's a hard problem. So what we've done is we've abstracted a set of principles we call the 5 laws of cloud native authorization. And they basically, they're best practices that all these people write about. The first one is you want to extract authorization out of each one of your microservices and centralize it into what we call a purpose-built authorization service. And so all of these 5 companies, they did that, and they build it as a distributed system so that it's not just, kind of like one of those things where, you're processing over stale data, you're making decisions over, live data. The way they do that, the second principle is fine-grained. So instead of relying on coarse-grained roles and permissions, you want to basically allocate the smallest, set of permissions that you can to users.
Sure.
The third one is policy-based. So you want to make sure that authorization policy is expressed as code. You and I worked on things like configuration as code and infrastructure as code.
Everything is code.
Everything is code. Now policy is code. So you want to express it in a domain-specific language. In our case, it's Rego, the Open Policy Agent, DSL.
Right.
And you want to be able to, store and evolve it separately, and maybe even put it under the control of your security engineering team. So now the application engineers can work on app logic, and then security engineers can own and maintain that policy.
Right.
The fourth one is real time. So you want to make decisions based on real-time data, and you want to, so rather than relying on stale permissions that are stored in access tokens, you want to basically make a call to the authorizer right before you want to make a decision about, whether you can show a protected resource to a user.
Sure.
And the last one is you want fine-grained decision logs. So like we talked about, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you get breached. And so rather than just having a login trail, Alan logged in at 2:35 p.m. today, you want to know what Alan did. Every single decision that the application made, whether you were allowed to view this resource or access this resource or not. And so that's a best practice as well. And so those are the 5 laws of authorization. If you want to, go build a modern authorization system, we advise you to follow those laws. And if you need help with that, with an open source solution, we have Topaz for you.
And if you just want a really good commercial solution that incorporates all that, there's
exactly.
Acerto.
If you don't want to kind of build everything on your own,
and who does? If it's not core and critical to your business,
exactly.
Don't do it.
And that's what most people tell us. It doesn't make their beer taste any better.
No.
It's critical, it's the cost of doing business, but it's not differentiated.
Or it's not the core thing they do either.
Yes.
Acerto, ASERTO, and it's acerto.io,
.com.
Excellent.
We sprung for the .com.
You're the first .com I've had today. Acerto.com. Check them out. And now you have an idea. Not only is he really intelligent, Omri's really one of the nicest guys in the business here.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy talking with him. Omri, a pleasure. I'm glad.
Likewise.
Wish you all the luck with Acerto. Come back. You don't have to wait till KubeCon. We can always do these. We're going to take a break. We're in Detroit. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
I said we would be back. Here we are. Here we are at KubeCon 2022. Detroit, Motor City, Detroit City. Welcome. Hey, I said we have another great conversation, and the gentleman that I've talked to on Techstrong TV, Nuri Golan, who's CEO with Sosivio. Welcome, man.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. So tell folks about yourself, tell folks about Sosivio.
So I'm Nuri Golan, I'm a serial entrepreneur. My company is Sosivio, I'm the CEO and co-founder. We're a predictive troubleshooting platform for Kubernetes. Essentially, we're a next generation observability tool. We're helping customers, mainly large enterprises. We're moving into Kubernetes, find problems ahead of time, prevent those big issues that they have in production where customers get frustrated, crashes, whatever they are. So we can see a lot of those things ahead of time with a fundamentally different architecture that we've built, which we call data swirling. We can get into all of that. But the main takeaway is that we're helping people manage their Kubernetes environments efficiently, optimally, and do it at scale.
I got to spend about a good half an hour with your CTO during the hockey game the other night.
Yes.
About 10 minutes of the conversation, I understood the rest. I was like,
it makes you feel better. I don't always understand what he's saying either.
Okay,
so
well, I'm a CTO. I'm supposed to know what he's talking about. And I was like, okay. No, it's actually very fascinating. I think one of the really interesting is we talk about Kubernetes being complex, and it's not news to anybody. Setting it up, part of it. I'm not sure folks really necessarily appreciate the amount of telemetry data that you can generate in just a good size, more or less a large Kubernetes environment. That in and of itself, it's not just having a good observability engine to be able to examine that data. It's like you may not be able to keep up with it, the amount of data that's being created.
Yeah, that's really our philosophy, is that at some point, too much data really is a thing. There's a trend that we want as much data to look at, we want as much data to use for AI, but at some point, we can't keep up with it. We need to use machine learning AI in order to analyze what's inside. And that's really our philosophy. And even more than that, we believe that you can't offload all of that data, all that information elsewhere. At some point, it's a resource burden, there's security issues with that. And so our whole product is built around analyzing everything on the edge, inside the customer's environment, which not only allows us to get better insights because we're seeing everything, we can analyze much more, but also to do that in a friendly, secure way to the customer because we're not taking information elsewhere, especially in a world today where data security is so important, data breaches are everywhere. So being able to help them harden their environment and not be a threat to their environments is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Do you find it's more the operations part of the team? I thought that was falling off, thank you. I appreciate the real-time adjustment here. I feel like I'm at the chiropractor. Do you find is it more the operations team that are likely to reach out and say, hey, we're looking for some help here? Or is it more platform engineering development folks that are also trying to get, because that's who we call in, right, when we really need to dig into the telemetry?
The operators, it's really, at the end of the day, it's the folks who are responsible for making sure things are up and running. And every organization is a little bit different, but for us, the pain point that we solve is when you can't figure out what's gone wrong, and you're anxious about how do I get things back up and running, we help those operators essentially find the problem immediately. And so for them, the recurring theme or word that we hear from our customers is confidence. They're now confident to be able to monitor, to manage things at scale because they know they have a tool like ours which can sit there and point them exactly in the right direction. Not point them to actually tell them what the problem is.
Interesting. If I remember right, I think this morning you were on a panel or a conversation with HPC or?
So this morning we did I wasn't personally, it was with Liran, our CTO, but with HSBC, who's a partner of ours.
Okay.
And I think it's a common theme that we've seen here, at least I've seen in the conferences, a lot of large enterprises. I think in previous years, you saw Kubernetes was much newer. You didn't see as many large enterprises who were trying to use and adopt it. And it's been encouraging for us to see how many huge banks, huge organizations are willing to make that leap, but they're looking for the right tool set that can help address their needs and meet their requirements. So going back to what I was saying earlier, our focus has really been on some of those organizations who we feel are underserved by the tool set that's out there, which are more SaaS and focused on online cloud customers. But the ones that are still on-prem or hybrid, they also need tools. Not all of them are going to be able to move to the cloud fully for quite some time. And even when they do, they're still going to keep some things on-prem.
It's interesting. I think it's one of the things that with open source, like with Kubernetes, doesn't face the same set of scrutiny as a product might going into a large enterprise. I know as a startup company, one challenges I had was, okay, but we're Comcast, or we're a very large bank, or we're whatever, and we operate at this scale. Can you do that? And that's tough for a lot of small companies. But you work with open source software, and and Kubernetes is very scalable. At least you can, distribute it to be very scalable. Doesn't mean you get the management capabilities with it, or the analysis for the data and the telemetry, the information that you're going to need. More or less, somebody else that's actually run that big of an installation.
Yeah.
So you're really on the edge.
You have to build for that. You need to understand those types of organizations and their needs and requirements. Aside from the security things, which we mentioned, being able to scale up to a massive capacity is something that you need to be aware of ahead of time. That's why a lot of companies don't necessarily go down that stretch. There's plenty of challenges with it. When you're not connected, version upkeep, that's a challenge as well. So there are tons of challenges with it, but that doesn't mean there shouldn't be products that serve those companies. These are major industries that are now all trying to move fully into Kubernetes. And so that doesn't mean that there's never going to be one tool that serves all. You need different tools that address different types of customers. So we're one type of tool that addresses a wide range of customers, but specifically one that has a lack of options today.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned data swirling. I know that's a concept or idea that's you're really promoting about your approach to technology. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
So data swirling goes back to the architecture that I mentioned, which is doing everything on the edge. So tightly coupled data collection, analysis, and with our AI engines, and everything is done inside the customer's environment. So if we look at failures, and in Kubernetes, most of the times failures are these chains of events. And so if you can see that entire chain develop, you can first of all do predictions. You can give a much earlier indication that something's going to go wrong. And so that whole architecture is built around being able to see as much as possible, ingest as much information as possible. You'd never be able to do that if you were exporting data off of the environment in a resource-friendly way. So everything we do is optimized so that we're not a burden. We're extremely lightweight. But we're able to ingest massive amounts of data, and there's also specific signals that we know to look for which cause problems in Kubernetes environments.
You don't want the analysis time to go through all that data to also be a delay in trying to resolve whatever the issue is.
Any problem can eventually be solved with enough time and enough people that can dig into the weeds. But when you're a large organization operating at scale, you don't have time, you don't have the people to do that. You need answers right away. So having that constant real-time analysis layer and being able to give insights in real time, that allows them to actually continue to operate without just be in war rooms, for days at a time.
Great, very good. So where can folks find out more? Sosivio, the IO.io, right?
Yeah.
Built into your name?
Yeah, so siv.io, so SOSIV.io. We're very active on LinkedIn. That's where we put out a lot of our announcements and information. But you can find everything on our website. We have a YouTube channel as well, which a lot of our videos, including the fireside chats from yesterday and a few others we did, are all there. I'm on LinkedIn
free
as well.
Accounts or Sandbox or?
Yeah, so you can go on our website at any time and you can download the installer, which you'll get up and running in a couple minutes. You'll be having insights already, so there's a pre-train aspect and a learning aspect of our product, but you download the product. We encourage customers to do that, even if they're going to delete it 10 minutes later, because the real impact is when you put it on and all of a sudden you start finding things you didn't know were there. We've had that experience with many of our customers, including some of the largest banks in the world. So we do very much encourage that. That part is free. There's a free month trial. And even if you don't want to use the license part of our product, we have a free version with a ton of observability metrics, and that we're not open source, but that's our contribution to the community. It's always free, and you can use that whenever you want.
Very good. Check out Sosivio.io, is the Sosiv.io. Well, Nuri, great talking with you again.
As always.
Congratulations on hopefully having a successful show.
Yeah, it's been great.
Talking with lots of potential customers and users, and appreciate you stopping by and talking about some of the challenges with managing observability in a Kubernetes environment. So again, my thanks to Nuri Golan from Sosivio. We'll be back in a moment with other great folks interviews, just like with Nuri. We'll see you in a minute.
is Techstrong TV.
Okay, we are back live at QSC 2022 in the Venetian, Las Vegas. Our next guest is Alex Alvenos.
You got it.
Thank you. Alex is yet another end user here at the Qualys conference who presented on what he's been doing with using the Qualys product, but more importantly, what are the challenges and what are the aims of his unique situation, and we're going to find out a little bit about it. Alex, first of all, welcome and thanks for joining us. Let's start off with maybe a little bit of who you are, your background, and where you work.
Yeah, so been in the IT space for 15 plus years, security focused for over 8 of those years. So half my career spent in security. My current position is I'm the head of the security program at Global Lending Services, official title, Senior Director.
Okay.
So I started there 3.5 years ago, and I've been building their security program since. We've got a really robust program now. We're protecting a lot of dealerships, a lot of customer data, and of course our employee data.
So tell us, what is global lending? I mean, sounds like you lend money, but what exactly does global lending do?
Yeah, so we're in the subprime auto finance space. So
Great.
we work through franchise dealerships. We have a network of over 13,000. So you go to a car dealer to get a car loan, unless you have 20, 30 grand burning a hole in your pocket, most folks get a loan. And so we're a lender on the dealer side that could finance a customer's purchase. So we've had over 500,000 customers depend on us for their auto financing. And our mission is to put people in affordable automobiles and get them to work, get them to their kids' school, their doctor's appointments. It's a really important mission to us.
Absolutely.
And one of our core values is to care deeply, and you can really apply that to security. So not only do we do it on the business side by getting people in affordable automobiles, but we work to protect their data. We work to make sure that they get the best experience possible no matter what they're doing, whether they know about it or not.
No. Well, but you know what? That's a good point you bring up. They don't want to know about it, but they want to make sure. They don't want to have to hear about it. They don't have to find out about it on the newspaper or the TV show that they're part of, or getting a letter that you're part of a breach, right? They want it, and that's when security works best sometimes, is when I don't have to worry about it. Someone's doing it and doing it well. Before we get into what you spoke about here, again, without giving out anything proprietary that someone out there could use against global lending, cloud-based, on-prem, hybrid, I mean, what is kind of the profile, if you will?
So in company terms, we're relatively young. We started in 2011, so we really focused our core IT services on the cloud.
Yeah.
And so we were leveraging the ability to deploy quickly, scale quickly.
Yeah.
It's been like a huge part of our success of our business. And we're data-driven, analytics-driven, and so being in the current, which is cloud-based, is really where we're at.
Excellent. All right, we got all that out of the way. Let's jump into what you spoke about here at the QSC event.
Absolutely. So I was here talking about the patch management module. And so patch management is a fundamental part of cybersecurity. Everyone should be patching. If you're not patching, then question your choices.
Right.
But patching is, everyone can patch their one computer. They go home, hit update. When you're patching a fleet, you're patching critical mission-ready servers, you have to do it tactically, and you have to have something that's reliable. And so in our journey through the talk I did today, we spoke about how COVID-19 impacted our endpoint fleet. We literally overnight, out of concern of our employees' health, we had a primary on-site workforce that literally overnight picked up their equipment and worked from home. So from a security perspective, very exciting is the word I would use. When you're in security, you don't want an exciting day. You want a boring day. Boring days are the best days in security. So we had an exciting time logistically getting everyone home, getting their systems secured. Then we discovered that our existing solutions were built for that old architectural model, the on-prem. If a system was in our building and online, it was good. But now with the remote model, you had VPNs to contend with. You had remote latency. Not everyone's internet's the same. We're based out of Greenville, South Carolina. Some folks live rural. It's a great place to be. It's a great lifestyle to have. But internet providers might not have kept up, as much as they should have. So now we're contending with all of those factors, and we're seeing that patch efficacy is going down. We're seeing that vulnerabilities and risk are going up. And we had to find a problem. That was a problem we had to solve. So we worked with AT&T Cybersecurity. They're who we partner with to reach Qualys. And we landed at the VMDR solution. And VMDR was just released right before this problem occurred.
I remember.
Not saying Qualys was in the right place at the right time. And for us, it was an expansion of their services that they really encouraged. So we went with VMDR, which gave us agent-based scanning, which was great. Now I can see my endpoints wherever they go. So great visibility. And so it takes that data and it builds a data layer, and then the Qualys agent gives us context. And what we didn't have before was the patch management agent. And so if you get the VMDR solution, the patch management module is free to scan. And so it was immediately telling us, here's your entire fleet, here are the patches you're missing, and here's your risk per asset. So we decided, well, to heck with it. Let's give it a try. If you're in the Qualys platform, there's a free trial button. So we tried with the assistance of our AT&T. We said, well, let's try it out in a test group. Worked really well. Literally when I say flip the switch, we flipped a switch. We used a tag for a test group, and we were pushing patches to a test group.
Fantastic.
Worked so well. We moved it on to a production group, and now ever since that time, we've been using it. Initially when I bought it, I said, this will be a 1-year COVID expense, but the product's been reliable. It's been good, so we've renewed it year after year, and it's really a core part of my cybersecurity portfolio now, and it makes our endpoints, patching is important, but you don't want it to be your priority because you want it to be automated. You want it to take care of itself, and that's where we're at. My admins, my analysts are spending less time worrying about patching. Our peers on our infrastructure side are spending more time worrying about bigger things. How do we scale the company? How do we grow our infrastructure?
Absolutely.
They're not worried about chasing someone down to install a patch, and that's been the biggest success. I don't want the smart people worrying about novice level things. Patching is important. It should be easy, and Qualys is the right fit. It's automated and it works. And I'm kind of like Shaq. I would never endorse or speak to something I don't fully believe in. And so when I say things, you can believe that it's true and that I'm happy about it.
All righty.
I don't have any other traits of Shaq.
You're not fighting with, who is he fighting with most recently? Yay or whatever he calls himself. Anyway, that took a left turn quick, huh? Let me ask, are you just patching endpoints at this point, or are you patching your cloud assets as well?
So right now we're focusing mainly on the endpoints themselves. And we look at Qualys Patch Manager for our server fleet, and we do the reporting on it. Our server guys like to use their platform, but we're looking to expand it to our Linux fleet some as well, because Linux can be a challenge, and over the time we've had the product, they've expanded into that market space, that platform, and so that's something we're looking to grow upon. The endpoints were the most challenging ones because they just left the building, and we really need the internet-centric agent to help us get through that challenging time.
Absolutely. 2 questions on that. Number one, a lot of organizations we spoke to had a double whammy in that situation, that scenario, in that the people who went home started using sort of non-company devices, right? They were using their daughter's laptop. God knows where their daughter had gone online, right? Or non-company, they didn't have the agent on there. And that was really a nightmare scenario for security people.
It was, and the way we architect our environment is we really restrict everything to those trusted devices. So that's one thing we focus on in our security testing. Can any untrusted or unmanaged device get on our network? And that's something we've locked down very tightly. So we really, we give our employees a system to work on, and we expect all business to be performed on that system.
Okay. Second question. Hi, buddy. Do you worry about pushing out patches that you haven't already tested on all the various configurations you have out there?
Oh, absolutely. The worst fear is everything starts blue screening, and you're like, I
got to roll that back.
We've not had that experience, luckily. We actually patch with a test group first, so roughly 10% of our population distributed across all roles and levels. We don't just test on analysts and operations folks, we test on managers, we test on executives, because we know that we want a diverse feedback loop to say, hey, people of all different roles, of all different responsibilities are having a satisfaction in this test push out. After the testing phase, which is a week, those patches automatically roll into our production.
Right.
So if we have an issue during testing, we are made aware of it with our service desk. They might say, oh man, we're noticing a trend in calls. That trend of users looks to be in the test group for patching. Let's dig deeper. If it's really close to prod time, maybe we push prod out a day or two. But if we can pinpoint what it is, we'll just exclude that singular patch. Let the rest of the patches push to production. Don't stop everything because of maybe one small patch.
Right.
So keep your environment risk profile, adjust the risk appropriately and take actions accordingly. So we've had, Microsoft occasionally has a hiccup. I think there was one they pushed out.
They've
where they
been
said,
known.
There was one they said, printers might stop working. We were like, okay, pump the brakes on that one. Let's see if we have that problem. And we were able to do all that management and coordination pretty easily with the Qualys tool. You log in, change your deployment query. It's pretty simple.
You know what? That's a poster child right there, because I think overall, one of the issues we have is companies are reluctant to automate patching, remediation, whatever you want. There's more to remediation than patching. And I think you've taken a very sensible approach to it. And I frankly, I wish more companies would.
No, we're in a good place. We're a mid-sized company. We're growing to the enterprise, and we have a lot of great leadership. There's a lot of buy-in to our security program. All of my executives, they all embrace the program. They all support it. And when you have that kind of buy-in, it's easy to be progressive. It's easy to move forward in a place that you want to be. We're very aggressive in our patching. Within 2 weeks, 95% of my patches are rolled out.
Great.
And
it's beautiful.
And that's a great place to be. And the difference, maybe someone's on leave, maybe someone's taking a vacation. It's usually there's an explanation to why we're getting past that 2 weeks. 30 days is our cap. At 30 days, we're sending people out to hunt down a device to figure out what happened to it.
Why it didn't patch.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, man. Is this your first QSC?
Mine, yes. I've had one of my analysts on my team come to one previously, and I watched the virtual one. But in person is so much better. So.
No doubt. No doubt about that. Hey, Alex, I want to thank you for coming on and telling us about your particular journey here with this.
Yeah.
I'd love to check in with you 6 months or a year from now. And maybe when you start to roll it out to the Linux machines and to some of the other cloud assets too. Because I think that the speed of business today is moving so fast, we're not going to have time to manually do these remediations. We've got to learn to trust the tools if we're going to keep up.
Yeah, the legacy patch process is dead. Long live the cloud, right? So,
amen, brother. All right. Hey, we're live here in Vegas at the QSC event. We have a few more people we're going to be interviewing, so stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. We're back here live in Vegas for the Qualys QSC 2022 show. We're in the home stretch, kind of, right? We're in the afternoon of the second day. One of the nice things we've had the last couple of days, though, is we've got a good mix of guests on here. We've had some interesting security practitioners, customers. We've had Qualys people. We've had analysts. We've had a good mix of people. I'm really happy to introduce you right now to Eugene Ostapenko.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah,
okay.
Got it right.
Eugene is a CISA, and he is from all the way from Melbourne, Australia, which is a bit of a ride from here. And we're happy to have him. Eugene, welcome. Why
Thanks,
don't
Alan.
you, if you don't mind, tell the people a little bit about your background and your company?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Thanks for the introduction. So, as Alan said, I'm Eugene Ostapenko. So I'm currently head of information security, risk and compliance for Alien. It's about a mouthful of my official title, but effectively I run information security practice. So I'm I'm working as a CISO for the company. CISO, we're saying in Australia, not CISO. That's
tomato. Okay.
Yes, but it's been few learnings for me. So Elon is their data analytics company. So we. Our data is there set on Consumer Commercial Bureau. So what the bureau is, we receive their financial transactions from the institutions around Australia and New Zealand. Then we compute this data, we apply our analytical logic in there, and we generate credit rating scores. So when the individual or the organizations want to take a loan, they would request the credit rating score from ourselves. And
So this is not for individuals; it's for business credit.
It's for
rating.
both. It's their individuals.
It's individuals
Yeah,
as well.
that's right.
Because I was going to say, here in the U.S., of course, Dun & Bradstreet does a lot of the business ones, where the personal is more Experian, TransUnion, Equifax is the other one.
Yes.
And for those of you who may not be familiar with the company, Elan is the company?
Ilion.
Gene was telling me it was the Australian, New Zealand, Dun & Bradstreet
Yes.
subsidiary that was spun out. And,
Precisely, yeah. So the Dun & Bradstreet in 2015, a private equity company have purchased Dun & Bradstreet, and they've renamed that as Ilion, and since then we've been in the competition, so which is always
Got
good.
it. Absolutely.
So to put it in context, we have 25 million of personal records on our database.
Wow.
The total Australian population is 30 million. About 2 million of their commercial entities. So the data security is paramount for us. It's our lifeblood, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, look, we saw it here in the U.S. with the Equifax breach a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was a crazy number, like 400 million records or
Yes.
something like that. And, so when someone in your line of business gets breached, it's big.
It will be a big
And
impact.
it's big and it's bad. That being said, you're here. You presented at QSC this year. If you wouldn't mind, would you share with the audience a little bit about what you presented?
Yes. So as a CISR, my role is to keep the company secure. I'm responsible for that. In order to do so, I need to operate as a business stakeholder, as a business member. So therefore, for me, it is important to operate within the funds I'm allocated for a year and to do this as cost effective as possible. So what I was presenting at the Qualys conference is how to do more with security. And example I was given is using a Qualys cloud platform as a way to consolidate the security processes into a single platform and thus reducing the total cost of ownership. So I was looking at their direct savings, i.e. the cost savings associated with the licenses, as well as their personal savings, where the time freed by my team is reinvested into addressing other risks outside of the platform. So that was I thought it was taken well, and there was a lot of questions from people just outside of the side of the presentation.
I've been in security for a long time, 30 years. I've had this discussion with a lot of security people. First of all, it's near, could you actually prove an ROI on security? It's it used to be a very controversial subject. But that goes hand in hand with kind of what you were speaking about, which is how do we get a handle on our cost of security? Because traditionally, it's funny, Sumed, this Qualys CEO, was our last guest, and we were talking about this very issue, right? Managing risk with security, it's a question of dollars and cents. And for too long, and I'm not blaming you, but too many CISOs in security said, if only I had this new technology, that new tool, this many more people, I could really do the job. And then 6 months or a year later, well, I need one more thing. There's this new thing. There's a new thing.
That's actually, you're right. I mean, and that's where I think the CISOs would differentiate. We have our CISOs who are very focused on technology and they believe a technical solution is going to solve the problem.
Right.
It is not. So it's a combination of the factors. Always people, always processes, always technology.
Sure.
Now, none of those three guarantee absence of a security breach. So the breaches inevitably would happen to any organization. As much as I hate to say that might happen to Ilion. My job as a CISR for a company, make this breach as as rare as possible. So trying to reduce the likelihood of the breach. Even if the breaches that could occur, then my next stage is actually to reduce to reduce the impact, have a faster response. So I'm quite clear in my mind that it is impossible. No matter how many tools we have, how many things we throw at security, it's never enough. I mean, if there are large corporations, governments get breached, I mean, we are mid-sized companies, so I'm being realistic there. We will not be able to compete. Where we will be able to compete is actually, doing things smarter, doing things faster, having a more agile response practices, having maybe easier access to the products, and just work smarter, not harder. But breaches are inevitable part of the life.
So, without giving out any confidential data or trade secrets, I've got a whole audience out there. There's probably about 3,000 to 5,000 people watching this right now. What can they do to be more efficient with their security spend, right, and get a better return on what they're spending?
I think I strongly believe that one of the best investments the company can make is actually their breach response plan. It's not technology, it's not people, it's the process. And this breach response plan should absolutely be developed in conjunction with the C-level, with the board. So you have to take your business through a certain thinking process around what would be the business response to a security breach. Yes, the team and security and the CISO will work to, as I was saying, to mitigate the likelihood and mitigate the impact. It's inevitable. So where I believe that there more resilient companies differentiate from the companies that fell apart is the leadership of the executive team, the leadership of the board, and being able to manage public relations and manage to the customers. And that's I think that's one of the most wise investments. And it's not that expensive considering that you're deploying the tools. Tools are important, absolutely, but they're not guaranteed. So
absolutely. And look, but it goes back also to what you said, people, process, technology. This isn't strictly a security maxim, by the way. People, process, and technology is what we use to solve many business processes.
Yes.
But you know what? You're right. Process sometimes, if I had to put a dollar value on what it costs to implement these things, process is probably a little, especially today, a lot less money than people. People are maybe your biggest expense.
Exactly, yes.
And technology, as I said, there's always another tool. There's always another new trinket, some shiny thing they want to buy. Go ahead.
Now, what I was going to say that in 2022, to be absolutely frank, most of their security technologies could be considered as a commodity. So go on the market, there are thousands of the products really there, so you can replace one product with the other. So it's really what do you do with the technology, how you integrate with your environment, what value you're deriving from that, and what that value costs you, or how much effort they actually spend. So, and I think that's a real art really of security, to take those Lego blocks and just put them into a shape.
Into a real thing. So we're here at the Qualys conference. Let's talk about Qualys specifically. What are you doing with and there's the Qualys platform, but there's like 20 different products.
Yes, yeah.
Right, that are all part of this platform. Again, without saying anything, proprietary, what are you doing to help save money while, I'm assuming you are utilizing these Qualys solutions.
Yes, yeah.
How are you doing that to save money?
Well, the biggest savings factor there in Qualys, we've been using Qualys from 2019, and we started with the vulnerability management module. That's what was our initial requirement. And as COVID hit and other things developed within the industry, within Elion, we started bringing more and more modules. So I think there are two major factors in consolidating the tool set, including Qualys. The first one is their cost. It's more cost effective to purchase a license to extend an existing solution than to build a whole new solution. So as an example, Qualys has a patch management module. we're using it for subset of our assets. It's much more cost-effective. It's more cost-effective for us than to bring another totally separate solution. That's on the licensing front and the implementation cost. The other factor to consider is actual personnel cost associated with training people, getting to use the product, getting the maintenance and other activities done. So human capital is, yes, one of the most expensive categories on security. So optimizing their effectiveness of the information security team is a big plus of consolidation. Another factor that we found useful in the integrated tool is their ability to have a better relationship with the other teams around the technology. So the security operations or security teams are usually focused on detecting vulnerabilities. Now we have operations team that are tasked to resolve them, to patch them. It is very powerful security collaboration where I would go to my infrastructure team and I would say, well, you can patch that. I will give you not just the ability to, well, I'm detecting vulnerabilities, but I'll give you an option to do patching more effectively with the patch management. Then we are focusing on the single source of truth, in this case, Qualys Vulnerability Dashboard. So we all look at the same data, we all work with the same input information, and therefore it just makes it easy for everyone across the board. Since in patch management we keep expanding the Qualys, it's a natural growth for us. We looking at different modules and bringing more and more teams on the journey and saying, well, let's work together on a single platform, which I believe is very powerful and brings people together.
I love it. Eugene, I want to thank you for coming all the way here from Australia just to be on Techstrong TV.
Thanks,
seriously,
Alan.
thank you for coming
thank you very much.
and sharing with us. Best of luck.
Oh, thank you.
Let's hope we don't hear about any breaches at your place. And
Me too.
But you're on the job, so it's all
right.
good.
Thank you.
All righty.
To be here.
Nice.
Today.
All right, we're going to take a break here. We'll be back in a moment from Las Vegas for Qualys QSC. Stay tuned.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside our extensive conference coverage, we had plenty of great content today. We'll be back again on Monday, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.